Come on in. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay. Oh, 'tis our delight for the red and white. The imps are here to stay.
Morning all. You might have guessed it's a little bit chilly up here, hence the double hoodie hat. No gloves on, my fingers are bloody freezing. Wasn't going to do a dog walk video today. Told my boss on Slack that I was going out to mooch the pooch for 5 minutes, and he said, is there going to be a dog walk video for me to watch? So Ash, your wish is my command. This is on company time though, let's not forget that. Joke, by the way, I'm not overstepping the mark. So it's a nice, cool, crisp morning up here in the Wolds, but at the same time, there's not a lot of wind. Perfect to record a video. And I'm interested in something that's come out over the past couple of days, in that we've alluded to the fact that we're going to sign a project player. Heavy rumours that it could potentially be Ben House from Eastleigh, who I'll come on to in a little while. This is just something I've literally picking up from social media. So sometimes when I say there's strong rumours or such and such, you know, I've got not inside information, but you have a bit of an inkling. I've had no inkling from anybody official, not from any kind of contacts that will come to me and say, I think this is happening, and I'll go, that's probably going to happen then. I've literally just picked it up from social media. So I'll cover that in a little while. Now, yeah, I find it really interesting because I've long believed that the National League is a great place to go and pick up players. And I think you only have to look at players like the lad at Rotherham who plays centre half, who said that'll kill Lincoln. I can't pronounce his name, would love to be able to, not going to even try, it'd be embarrassing. Who, you know, played against us in the National League and then has gone on to kind of be an established Football League player. And it's easy to talk about the likes of Charlie Austin and Jamie Vardy, I think, as well, who have gone on from the National League to have really good, strong careers. For Lincoln, it hasn't been quite as productive, I don't think. I think when you look at the likes of Simon Yeo and Richard Butcher, who have done very, very well for us, but they weren't really brought in as project players. They were brought in at a time where, you know, the whole Lincoln model was, let's just try and sign people from the National League because we can't afford to go and pick players from League One and even League Two. And it worked for us. Over the years, we have gone for what you would probably count as project players. David Ridings was one that I mentioned in the worst signings articles that I've been doing. He came from Halifax. He had got National League or Conference Player of the Year. He'd scored 8 goals for them that season. It didn't work. We have had project players in the past, like Sam Clucas, didn't work out for him at Lincoln, but was a very, very good project player in the long term. You could argue probably Remy Longdon now was a project player. And look, he didn't do too badly. I think he was a player, though, that came from, you know, he worked his way into the Lincoln squad. We didn't say, right, we're going to do our due diligence, find the player that we want to sign, bring him in and work with him. Remy was very much, you know, knock on the door, and when it was open, he stuck his foot in the door and said, here I am, and impressed that way. So this is the first time, I think, that we've seen Michael Appleton look for, or Michael Appleton's Lincoln, let's say, it's not a single player, but look for a project player from non-league. Danny did it, Juan Luque. Lots of interesting stories about Juan Luque being at Lincoln. Certainly a player who looked like he'd got the talent. The fact he's since done nothing other than play in the National League suggests that maybe he didn't have. We gave Lee Shaw a trial that summer, didn't take a punt on him for some reason, or for obvious reasons, because he then went to Chesterfield, didn't break through, and etc. So I think we've rarely dipped our toe in the waters of a project player. Could be for several reasons. You know, we know that this regime likes to loan players out that aren't getting game time. Max Melbourne, Theo Archibald, classic examples, Ethan Ross last season. So we haven't really developed that, I hate the word model, but we haven't looked at that model and gone, right, we'll develop a project player. We've kind of had players come in who don't get minutes. They're not really projects. You know, they want minutes, they go out, that's kind of it. I think when you're fishing in the National League waters, you're more likely to pick up a player who is willing to sit on the bench for a season, to come on for the last 10 minutes here and there. If we sign someone now who's willing to acknowledge that his first start for the club might well be in the EFL trophy next season, because they're players, excuse me, I don't like to say that I'm more grateful for the opportunity, but that's what it is, isn't it? You sign a player from a Premier League academy into League One as a project player, he's going to come in and want to impact the first team. And I think about Charlie Brown at MK Dons. I think is a classic example of that. Moved from Chelsea, in and out of the team, but hasn't at the moment really impacted their first team for on a significant level. And he'll be disappointed at that, having come from Chelsea. I think if you've come from Eastleigh, Bromley, Boreham Wood, and you're given that opportunity and you're the right character, you're more likely to wait for it. And I think history is littered, even recent history is littered with examples of where it's worked and where it hasn't. Adi Yusuf, when he joined, I think, Mansfield, didn't work. I think Mo Isa was at Greenwich, moved to Cheltenham, did very, very well. Daniel Udo, to a degree, is a good example. He signed from moved from Telford to Shrewsbury, kind of been in and out at Shrewsbury. I think he's established as their kind of main striker now. Limited, like this man, Big Dave Cameron, who did come out of non-league. But, you know, I think Udo probably got a little bit more about him. With Dave Cameron, what I would say, he'd played professionally in Scotland beforehand, so it's a little bit different. And I always think, when I think about National League kind of treasures, so to speak, I always have a trio in mind that we, Lincoln City, were, sounded a little bit like another famous podcaster there, that we, Lincoln City, were heavily linked with. Either couldn't afford, didn't have the budget for, couldn't pay the wages, I don't know. And then they went on to much, much better things. And they were Aaron McLean, George Boyd, and Craig McCall-Smith. And they were players that we were linked with kind of around the 2003-4 season, I think, might have been 4-5. And then they went to Peterborough. History, age might be blurring my memory, but I think that they went there under Keith Alexander. So I think Keith wanted them at Lincoln. We couldn't afford them. He's then gone to Peterborough, had the budget, brought them in. And look, you could argue that's where the current Peterborough model lay, you know, the roots in the current Peterborough model, because when McAntony took over at Peterborough, they were like us. But we pipped them to the playoffs, I think. And they were on that television show, Big Ron Manager, and that kind of got McAntony interested. So Peterborough were a League Two side at the time. Now that's unthinkable. Now they're a yo-yo team. They have their moments in the Championship. They don't last particularly long, but they're never threatened by relegation from League One. You could argue they do that by player trading. You couldn't argue it. It's fact. They do it by player trading. But what they do is they bring permanent strikers in, because strikers fetch the big money. We talk about the first £1 million player for Lincoln. We talk about, you know, Sean Rowan's been mentioned in the past. I mentioned Alex Woodyard in the past. Lewis Monsmer has been mentioned. I saw somebody on Twitter yesterday saying Regan Poole potentially. We talk about it, but it's never a striker. And the reason is that that's the one area of the field over the last, I'm even going to go as far as saying 10, 15, 20 years, we've never managed to have the striker who is 23, 24, 25, scoring 23, 24, 25 goals a season, because they're the players that make you the money. They're the players that are your first £1 million transfer. Do you know what I mean? It's so much harder. If you had got a player like, we talk about Regan Poole, if we'd got a player 23 years old playing up top with Poole's reflective ability, but in the striker role, not in the defender's role, there's every chance now that we'd be looking at the first £1 million sale. And it's difficult in today's market. I take that. People are less willing to spend £1 million on players. But Matt O'Reilly, okay, he's not a striker at MK Dons, but he's an attacking midfielder. He scored goals, linked with a £1.5 million move to Celtic. You look at an Alex Woodyard, okay, we were a level below, but great midfielder, player of the year, cleaned up on player of the year for us the season before he moved. You know, minimal because defensive players aren't as sexy, and sexy players draw the money, non-sexy players don't. So to tie that back in at the beginning, the news that we're actually looking for a striker, a project striker, to bring in and to work with and to develop, kind of is a step in the direction that I think that the club want to take. Part of our recruitment model, our recruitment process. They've acknowledged that to draw the money and to make big money from players, I think they've got to be attacking players. They really have. That's why Theo Archibald has remained at Leyton Orient and not come back to us. We could have called him back, filled that left side role. He could have come off the bench a little bit, but what's he doing at Leyton Orient? Accruing value, getting goals, getting assists. And when the summer comes and people are looking for attacking players and they've got a budget of 200,000, what they're going to spend 150,000 on, it ain't going to be the centre back. It's going to be the attacking player. And you see that with Theo Archibald. So it's interesting, I think, that we're going for a project player. Now, obviously, we are linked with Ben House. We've been linked with Ruben Rodriguez at Notts County. I think in Rodriguez, I see shades of, and it's a different time and all that, I see shades of the David Ridings kind of player where, if you've got flair, you can beat players, all that sort of stuff. It's great doing it in the National League, but you step up 2 divisions and it's a big, big difference. And I think we saw that, for instance, in Jordan Maguire-Drew, couldn't step up 1 division, doing decent, doing relatively well rather at Grimsby at the moment, but never was able to step up to the Football League. Joe Ward, on the other hand, unable to break into our National League team, stepped up to the Football League, did very well. So I think you can, when it's flair players, wide players, they can be a little bit hit and miss. Strikers, I think there's less risk with, because a good striker is a finisher. A good striker, a natural finisher, will finish at any level. If you know how to put the ball in the back of the net in the National League, as long as you develop the rest of your game and you're a natural finisher, you'll do it in the Premier League. Jamie Vardy, Charlie Austin. Jermaine Defoe didn't do it in the National League, but I remember Jermaine Defoe at Bournemouth. Natural finisher, will finish at any level. Dean Ashton, no, he got injured at West Ham, but will finish at any level. A natural finisher, Liam Hearn, brilliant natural finisher. Not somebody that I'm a massive fan of, but absolutely a player that you would say, doesn't matter where he plays, put the ball at his feet in the 18-yard area, you're going to get a shot on target. 1 time out, 1 every 3 shots will go in. So there are natural finishers. Find one of those in the National League, develop him and train him right, and that's where you've got your progression. That's where you've got your bring him in for 50 grand, sell him for 750 grand, and arguably if they're a project player as well, you don't have to worry about mass replacement. I think it's interesting we're looking at bringing the project player in when we've just brought in John Marquis, and we've already got Tom Hopper, we've already got Liam Cullen, lots of players to learn from. And I think that's really interesting as well. And sometimes when fans look at recruitment, I think we look at how is that player going to impact this football team. When people are talking about getting rid of Liam Bridcut, which I think is madness, they're talking purely about how he affects the play. How he affects the play on a Saturday afternoon, and you're not taking into account everything else. A football club is a living, thriving beast that is alive every day. And just because you don't see a headline on the Lincolnshire Echo, or you don't get me doing a dog walk every day, it doesn't mean that stuff isn't going on. And the players that we have are contributing to that off the pitch. Liam Bridcut is a massive, great example of that. But I think you bring a project player in, you've got to have the right players around, not just coaches. Do all the coaching you want, all the management you want, but players learn from players. Think about you. Think about your first job. The very first time you left school and you went into a job. If you did, I mean, you may have gone to university and I don't know. For me, who did I learn more off? Did I learn more off the manager? Did I learn more off the person who was tasked just with training me on systems and that sort of thing? Or did I learn it by doing it with blokes? Not, doing the job with the blokes who were around me. And I think back to Jackson's. I think the very first job that I had at Jackson's was on a stores at the back, and somebody who trained me on the system, and I'd been told by my manager what to do. I learned more from a guy called Paul Fox on the back store than I had from anybody else. And football's the same. You'll be given the tactics. You can have the strategy put in place. You learn from the people around you. And I think for 6 months at least, that's really good. I think it's a good position. There's a great question coming from Rob Wiles. I will take questions in a moment. So we'll move on because I'm rambling a little bit. So we'll move on to Ben House. I've done a little bit of research on Ben. Scored 10 goals last season in his maiden season with Eastleigh. Before that, he had been in the youth setup at Reading. He's represented Scotland to a certain level internationally. You know, he's got a degree of pedigree come out of his pathway. Nobody's been willing to take a punt in the 2 divisions below him. He's dropped down 3 divisions, Championship to National League. And then he's done relatively well. He hasn't scored. You're not going to see 23 goals in 24 appearances from him. But you see an evidence of scoring goals for a young man. You've seen evidence of the attitude that's required, I think, in that he's dropped down, he's fallen away from his pathway. Very, very easy to slip between the cracks after that. But he hasn't done that. So he's shown good attitude. He's got a bit of pedigree, represented his country. So there's a certain level of ability there. And then there's proving that he can do it in senior football. So all of the conditions are right. If indeed that is who we're looking at, I don't know. I read an article from the summer where Ben Strevens, who's the Eastleigh manager and who, by the way, was a very good lower league striker, Ben Strevens, he was at Barnet, I think, he used to score quite a few goals. So he's had a good manager in terms of developing him as a player. And he was talking, wouldn't be surprised to see him on the wants list, the scouts list for clubs higher up. So I think everything's in the balance. And just a point on that, having somebody like Ben Strevens as manager does help, because I think one of the strikers who came into Lincoln, albeit on loan, and genuinely looked like if he was our player would have been worth a couple of million in League Two, was David Sommer. And who did David Sommer play under? Played under Chris Sutton. And whatever you can say negative about Chris Sutton, he was a good striker. And he didn't develop David Sommer over a long period of time, but Sommer would talk about the respect he had for Sutton as a player and how he was helping him develop his game. So, and I genuinely believe that managers who have played in a certain positions are able to spot players in that position and develop them, particularly in a manner, in their own manner almost. You look at Michael Appleton, very much a midfielder, and you look at the likes of Liam Bridcut, who he hasn't developed, but he's worked with, he identifies with that player, he recognises that player. That's his general, a player that was in his position. So particularly interesting. Right, I think I've rambled on enough. I'm going to do some questions, but I'm going to start with Rob's because I do like this. It's exciting, but where could this leave Draper? Now, I think as Lincoln City fans, we've become accustomed over the last 5 years to having 2 or 3 strikers in a squad and nothing more. And that goes back to the National League days when we had Matt Reed, Adam Marriott injured for a portion of the time, Lee Angol and Jack Muldoon. But Angol came in late, Marriott was injured. We were light on strikers. Then we had the season where we just had Ollie Palmer, Matt Reed and Matt Green. That was our stage. That was it. They were our strikers. And eventually, I seem to remember at Coventry, we went 4-3-3 and stuck all 3 of them up front. You don't have a lot of options at that point. I think even recently with Tom Hopper coming in when he did, that Tyler Walker went out, but Tyrese John-Jules came in. We've always been a little light on strikers. And you look at other teams, I mean, before the recent sales, I looked at Portsmouth and they were saying, we've only got John Marquis, Ellis Harrison, Gasser Masadni. There was another lad on loan as well, I think. They'd only got 4 strikers, they needed another option. I mean, imagine that. Sorry. It's got to say it is Richard Ware. Sorry, Richard just commented it won't come up. There we go. And I worked at a time when I studied There we go. He's thrown me now. That's right, strikers. So we've become accustomed not to having kind of 4 or 5 strikers. I don't think it's a problem. I think even if you play one up front, to have 2 on the bench, so that if you need to, you can flip it and go, right, so we've played with, let's say, Liam Cullen up front for the first 65 minutes. We're not getting any luck against Accrington. Let's flip it, bring 2 off, and we'll now go with Marquis and Draper, or Marquis and House, or Marquis and whoever. So I don't think it's a major issue. I think what Freddie Draper needs is a long spell in senior football, 2, 3, 4 months, not the odd game here and there. Obviously, he's suffering concussion at the minute. I think he's done very well. He's looked to acquit himself well when he's come in. I can see a loan spell being a good next step for Draper. I actually think a loan spell in the National League, no lower. I don't think that he should go to Gainsborough, potentially York, potentially. I can see a loan spell for him, and I don't think that that's a negative reflection of Draper's input thus far in the season. I just think it's natural that to develop, you go out on loan spells. And you look at a lot of strikers. I talked about Defoe, didn't I? And I'm not likening the two, but Defoe was at West Ham. What did he do? Went out on loan to Bournemouth before getting back in the side. This hill kills me. Players go out on loan. And so I think that that's probably the way forward. It's a good question, Richard. Right. Let's go all the way to the top of the chat. So good morning to James Atkin, Jack James Richardson, Chris Graham, Sean Simons, Ash, Steve Leach, Will Mitson, Mr. Carlton, Mr. Freeston. Neil makes a point. Players on top money in the National League now, more than some League One and League Two clubs. Yeah, certainly last season with the wage cap, certainly with the likes of Salford and Wrexham paying good money. It's not as easy to fish in those waters. I think when you look back to Mikel Smith-McLean and George Boyd, they weren't cheap. That was 16 years ago. I think quality always comes at a price, whether it's coming from Eastleigh, whether it's coming from Fulham. If you're good enough, you'll cost the money. Evening Sam from New Zealand. Rob Clark, where would you say we need to strengthen now? And realistically, where would you say we're going to finish this season? Good question. I'll take the second bit first. I still say top of the bottom half. Still think between 12th and 14th. I maintained that when we were in the bottom 4. I was cautious at the beginning of the season. I did say probably, I think, 10th or 11th at the beginning of the season. So adjusted expectations slightly. But looking at the division, looking at the teams that have got to come to Sincil Bank, teams that, if we do get it right, if we do have striking options, attacking options, we should be able to beat at home. You would imagine that we can climb to that kind of top of the bottom half. And I think some of the work that's gone in this season will be reflected in a better campaign next season. I think players like Lass Sorensen, for instance, will be better next year for a full season than Michael Appleton, Lincoln City. I think some of the injured players, hopefully, you would imagine, might get back to full fitness by the time we kick off next season. So let's say top of the half, top of this bottom half would be a good finish. In terms of strengthening, I'd like to see another keeper come in, if I'm honest. Get Sam Long out on loan. Let's get his develop sped up. Let's get him playing senior football. Let's get him making errors out there, learning from those errors. Let's see that. So I'd like to see another keeper. Obviously, we're talking about a striker coming in. I expect another wide player, if I'm honest. Again, I just think with our injuries, you've got to have options when you're attacking at home. We haven't had. So we come up against Accrington, it's 0-0. You look to your bench, your most attacking player is Max Sanders or Lass Sorensen. You don't have the option to shake it up. We've got a lot of Accringtons at home coming up. Yeah, and when I say that, I mean clubs that you would imagine we should be able to we should be expected to beat at home, not in a complacent manner. You look at a fixture list, Ipswich, Sunderland, Charlton, you think, bloody hell. Accrington, Cheltenham, Morecambe, you think, this Lincoln City side, with the expectation we have, should be taking 3 points from those. And coming up at home, we have Cheltenham, Crewe, Morecambe, Doncaster, Gillingham. Huge games those. Win those games, and we won't win them all. But if you were to win all of those games, you're almost safe. Almost safe, because what's that? 15 more points on what we're on now. You're not far away. But those are the games where you're going to have two banks of a bank of 4 and a bank of 5 in some of those games. You've got to be able to affect those games. You've got to be able to change things if it's not working. You've got to bring fresh legs on 70 minutes or 60 minutes. So I think another wide player would allow us the option to make significant changes, both tactically and just in terms of fitness in the latter stages of crucial games. I'd like to see a central midfielder. Whether it'll happen or not, I don't know. That does depend on Bridcut. I hear that Bridcut's injury isn't as bad as first feared. So I think if Bridcut is fit and we're going to get 15, 20 games out of him between now and the end of the season, we can maybe manage without. Fiorini has been very good the last couple of games. Sanders is a player who I think has more to offer. McGrandles seems to be a bit more like the old Conor McGrandles. And there's 4 central midfielders for 3 roles. I think Maguire could be used in the 8, so depends on the fitness. I would have liked to have seen a centre-back, but I don't think that's going to happen. Again, I think the ambiguity around the injury situation to Adam Jackson and Joe Walsh makes it less clear as to when we're going to have those players kind of fit and firing. There is a danger that if Adam Jackson gets one more concussion, he's out for the season. That's concussion protocols. It's a worry. If we get Joe Walsh back, and I've been saying that now for more than a year, if we get Joe Walsh back, if the boy from Arsenal settles in at right back, we've then got Walsh, Poole and Ioma at centre half. I think you put Walsh with either of those two. Walsh and Poole for me at the moment would be the dream pairing, and that's without Adam Jackson into the equation. So lots of ifs and buts around injuries. You've got to be careful with budget. And let's not forget 2018-19, where Danny went out and signed Lee Angol. He signed, was that when he signed Jordan Roberts from Ipswich? Certainly signed the boy James Brown from Millwall. All money spent on players who didn't impact at all, really. So it's a balancing act in the winter window. You want to see lots, as fans, you want to see lots of players coming in. You want to see strengthening. You want to see, a flexing of the muscles and all the memes with the we're going up juice and all that sort of stuff. But the truth is, it's a fine balancing act. Very fine. It's getting colder out here, so I'm going to wrap this up shortly. Let's have a look at some more comments. Mr. Biddles, good morning. Rob Wiles, we've spoken to. I'm going to ignore Jack James's comment. There's a slip of the tongue, not literally. Neil Carlton says, but don't young, hungry players need to play, not warm the bench? It's a balancing act, isn't it? Because you can play young, hungry players, but if they need to develop and they don't do it straight away, the crowd turns really quickly. And I think you can affect a young player more with negativity than you can a more experienced player. So I think there is a fine balance. And look, if we sign a project player, I don't expect that we won't see him at all. But what I do think is that we'll see him sparingly. And I think if he's had senior experience at Eastleigh, and what he needs now is the coaching direction, there's a balancing act. So yes, young, hungry players need to play, but I don't think it's just as easy as saying, we're going to play all our youngsters, because it doesn't always work. It did well for us last season, but let's not forget we had Bridcut, McGrandles, Walsh, Jackson, Hopper, all in and around that extremely young side. You'll win nothing with kids, somebody said once, not sure who. Adam Butler. Danny Hone told me that as ferocious as Chris Sutton could be, he did get quality coaching under him in contrast to Tilson. Yeah, I think history doesn't remember Chris Sutton well. He suffers from, to a degree, something that fans perceive Michael Appleton to suffer with, which is he's not what we used to call in the building merchant industry a desk banger. He's not a fist pumps, sweet Caroline. Do you know what I mean? He's focused. And maybe that's what you get from having top flight football experience. Football to Chris Sutton was a science. Now, I understand that there were elements of Chris Sutton behind the scenes that were very different to Michael Appleton. Michael's very personable, very approachable, he's very pragmatic, he's a reasonable man, and I think some of those don't describe Chris Sutton. But he had top class coaching through his career, and for all of the shit he talks on the radio or on the telly or whatever he does now, I could imagine him having been a decent coach. Neil Carlton need a reserve team. I think the only problem with an under-23 side as it would be now is the cost. Putting another barrier between the 18s and the 23s where you might lose the Ocean Gallaghers and the Freddie Drapers. I do think secondary competition is needed, but when you have that secondary competition, you need the players to fill it. So, you know, for me, in an ideal world, there would be an under-21, not under-23 league, so that the under-18s could aspire to play in it without being too kind of swamped, but so that you could also play some overage players as well. That would be me. Elliot Taylor says, Jamie Vardy didn't score many when he first came to Leicester, but had Kevin Phillips as a forward coach. The rest is history. And there you go. It's all about the players around you. You know, John Marquis is, whether his actual execution of chances this season has been good enough for Portsmouth fans or not, there is no denying that he's a very good centre forward. He knows how to take up positions. So there we go. Jack James Richardson, have you heard of any potential bids on our players? I haven't heard of any. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody came in for Scully, but the impression that I get is that we're not bracing for it at the moment. I would imagine with Conor McGrandles, it'll be a case of wait till the summer and then it will be kind of shake hands and thank you for your efforts. I can't see McGrandles going now because I think with Liam Bridcut's injury situation, we need McGrandles' experience in the middle, especially now he's on. Now he's back on form. So Sam says, Jez George said that I think I would assume Freddie Draper is not likely to be sent out on loan. I think probably next season, bear in mind, if we get the Ben House in, we get a project player in. I could see it happening, but you know, I haven't seen that Jez George interview, to be fair. Jason Addison agrees with me. Best way to learn in the job is learning from more experienced people. Kate Jackson says we should stop looking at loaning spells to Gainsborough. The player will get games, but the level simply won't prepare them for League One football as it's poor. We shouldn't loan below North and South. I agree. To a level, I think if you send a 16, 17-year-old kid to the National League North, it's more about the physicality rather than the level of football. But I do think somebody like Draper, somebody like Sam Long, National League North really should be the lowest that we're sending them to. I understand why we're using Gainsborough in terms of consistency of coaching. We know Tom Shaw. It would just be nice if Gainsborough were one division above. James Richardson, how long till Pompey go in for Grant next season and thoughts on them signing Walker? They've signed Walker. It is what it is. You know, he's a good player. We know that he'll score goals at this level, and it is what it is. It's not a surprise. Danny likes to work with people he's worked with in the past. I also think wouldn't surprise me about George Grant at all. It's a shame because I would like to have thought that any deal that we had with Peterborough had like a clause that they couldn't sell back into the same division that Lincoln were in, but I doubt it massively. You know, I think that was just a contract clause with him that we wouldn't sell to somebody in his division. So there we go. Pete disagrees with Kate. He thinks that saying we shouldn't send to Gainsborough is the same as a Premier League club thinking they shouldn't send to League One, League Two because the standard isn't the same in the Premier League. Yeah, to a degree. I just think when you're League One, if that was Premier League, Championship would be League Two, Division 3 or our league, League 1 would be like the National League. Division 4 would be National League North. How many Premier League players do you see going into the National League? You know, 5 divisions, 5 steps below. I can see where he's coming from. Ash and Adam Butler are having a nice little chat. They clearly know each other. Small world, isn't it? Kate's arguing back with Pete. I'm going to let them argue because if I could just act as a conduit for their argument, everyone will go to sleep. Gary Burst is worth offering McGrandles a new contract. It is, but it's my understanding that it's not likely to happen because I think there is a desire for Connor to move back north. I might be wrong, but just some of the whispers that I've been hearing, I think his partner, whether it's wife or girlfriend, is working in Scotland, and I think I can see him going back up to the Scottish Premier League. Cornell has arrived and said the rumours are that Ben House from Eastleigh is tipped to join the Imps. Okay. Steve Freeston says McCarman's doing well at Trinity, whereas Adebayo Smith was out of his depth there. So, yeah, I suppose, again, it depends on the player. Jovan McCarman will be a better player for having been at Gainsborough, but you would expect next season for him to go higher. I wouldn't think loaning Sean Rowan to Gainsborough would be the right move. I think once a player has played in League One, has been part of the first team squad for a while, I get Kate's argument. For a player to get senior experience and understand what it's like, you know, getting kicked about and battered about and fighting for points every week, but without them feeling out their depth, I think Gainsborough is a half decent stopping house for them at that level. But I mean, me and Pete have spoken before, and you know, we've said York. Really, I think he's being belligerent, which would be unlike Pete, because we did say that Gainsborough, in a conversation not long back, probably wasn't the right place to send many of our players. He said York particularly would be a good call. So. Right, so that's that. Oh, it turns out that Kate and Pete are not arguing anymore. Kate said not arguing. I've decided arguing about Lincoln isn't worth it anymore. And Pete says he disagrees but takes the point. All's well that ends well. It's like a fairy tale. Right, we're 36 minutes in from a short dog walk that I was going to do. A couple of housekeeping points. First of all, I've been asked to put these on the Podbean, so I will be releasing them as a podcast. That's just really for ease of use for people who missed them first time round. So if you're watching this on the website, prefer to consume your content, I don't know, what's the word? Audioly. But if you prefer to listen to your content rather than watch, see my face, you can now get it on the Podbean. If not, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I don't really push it enough because I'm not one of those types, but yeah, if you subscribe, you never miss me coming online. It might be that you've got 10 minutes in the morning. You'll get a notification if you subscribe and just let you know that I'm here and talking. I'm not on the podcast tonight. It's Ben and Jake. So that will be available tomorrow morning at midday. I think that's about it. 37 minutes deep. Hopefully Ash is now happy. Oh, here we go. Ash and Cornell. Cornell doesn't know this, but Ash has got a little love in with Cornell. I've got to carry this on. So Ash, many of you know Ash Meikle. I'm sure Lincoln boy, my boss. I give me a full-time job not long back. A great guy, not bum looking. But he seems to think that, well, he doesn't seem to think, he is a massive Cornell fan. He loves Cornell's podcast. Whenever Cornell tweets something or puts something out, Ash will send me it and say, midday afternoon. Yeah, Ash will send me it and kind of say, you know, Lincoln's #1 podcaster. He wants to know when Cornell is joining me on the dog walk. It's what the fans want to see. Yeah, so Cornell, that's thrown out to you. If you can learn to drive and get out here and bring a dog, you can join me on the dog walk. So no, it's great. We've got a great community of Lincoln City fans, content creators, etc. And also the fact that 50 of you have watched me rambling on about football, walking around the walls for 38 minutes is superb. So thank you very much. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and I will see you all again soon. Take care.